And, you know, I need to credit the director and the producers and the entire production. They never pretended that there was no CG. They never said that it was all for real. They've been very clear, been very open. The articles are very open. They say that there's CG, there's breakdowns, there's like, this is how it should be done. It's a merging of all departments. You have the props department, you have the models department, you have the CG department, the cinematography, and they're all working together to the vision of the director. And especially on this year where we had a lot of bad examples on that sense with the no CGI BS. I feel that this is a breath of fresh air, and yeah, and shout out to Union. I mean, Union did an amazing job. Shout out to Union, and shout out to Lucy Cooper. Hi, Lucy.
Lucy.
And I really think they did an astonishing job with the VFX on this film. This podcast is brought to you by Backlight. Backlight Creative enhances the entire creative project lifecycle. For pre-production, there's Celtics. For scriptwriting, beatboards, shot lists, and planning. And Backlight Gem, a narrative design platform for games and VR. For post-production, we've got F-Track Studio to manage creative projects with custom pipelines and reviews with CineSync and F-Track Review for high-res, real-time media collaboration. To manage your assets, connect your own storage to Iconic, a scalable cloud-based media asset management platform. You can learn more at backlight.co. And now on to the show.
Hi everybody, welcome to Hugo's Hugo's Desk. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, and this is Hugo Guerra from Hugo's Desk. Hi Hugo.
Hi Ian.
We're here in person.
I know.
Amazing.
I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you're here. This is great.
Really excited to be here. We're going to be doing some furious jumping on Yorgos Lanthimos's Poor Things. No, we're not actually going to do furious jumping, but if you've seen the film, hopefully you know what that means.
Oh my God, yeah. I can't believe you said that. The film does have a lot of sex, that's true.
It has a lot more sex than anyone realized going into this film.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. But yeah, we're I'm so happy that you're here. I don't know, I can't go past that. Like, it's been like almost a year that you've been here.
Been a year since I came to the bunker. I've been in Europe for a month, and it's so cool to be in your house. Thank you for welcoming me here. We're going to record a couple of eps while I'm here, and it always, I think, makes for a better episode being together in the same room.
It's always so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can't wait to talk. Yeah, we can't wait to talk about this film. I mean, let's just jump right into it. Like, what do you thought about this film? Come on, give it to me. What do you think?
I loved it. It's the film of 2023 for me. I mean, I did love Barbie and I loved Oppenheimer, but they're event films, you know, and just were amazing to be in the cinema and watch those. This one, I had no idea what I was going into. I'd seen a couple of trailers, and there's mysterious music and bizarre camera angles in those trailers. I'd heard a little bit about some LED wall work, which was, you know, that's from a visual effects point of view, that's an interest, like piques my interest. But then for this film to be an analysis of the human condition, like it is, but also just a quirky, silly, crazy, fucked up film, I just was like taken aback and feel like it's my favorite film of the year.
Yeah, no, I know.
And
what
you?
mean. Yeah, me too. Like I've been a fan. I mean, I've been a fan of this director for many, many years, and I personally think that he's doing something really special. And as people know from hearing the podcast and hearing my videos, I'm a big fan of David Lynch, and I'm a big fan of David Cronenberg, and I've always really enjoyed weird directors. And Yorgos is just like some of the most creative things that is happening right now.
Oh my God!
Every time I go to the cinema, it's an event. Like I absolutely love The Lobster. I absolutely love The Favorite. He just has something special, and it's a combination of things. It's like the stories are really quirky and they're really strange and bizarre about, like you said, the human condition. But then visually, they're just stunning. They're just absolutely stunning.
And they mean something.
Yeah.
This film, it means what you want it to mean, but it means something, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, you really do never quite know what you're going to go into. Like Killing of the Sacred Deer, I'm going to admit right now that those characters in that film talk in a very sort of monotone way in the family. Like, as a joke, sometimes my partner Sue and I, we talk in that. That's how influential the film is, and we'll like ask each other questions over breakfast, like in that same Killing of the Sacred. That's how influential Yorgos's films are to me and Sue. So
this is something special. I completely agree with you. Like Barbie was amazing and Oppenheimer was amazing, but this is an event that like he only does like films every 4 years. So I feel like this is a really labor of love, and also it's like a very, very artistic movie, and it's a shame that we don't have more of these. I really feel that we used to have more of this. You know, we used to have more of these kind of creative movies that would maybe push the industry forward to different kinds of styles. We used to have more of that on the 90s and the 2000s. We don't anymore. I feel like films are very much the same. They're all shot the same. They all look the same. They use the same cameras. They use some lenses. We tend to kind of like, I confuse them all a bit. They all merge in my head a bit more. And it's curious that this film, I think there was 2 films this year that really struck with me, which is this and The Creator as well, which is a film also that is shot on a very special way as well. And I really miss this. I miss this level of creativity. But I have to say, it's not all roses. Like I thought the film is amazing, and I thought it's like always all his films, you need to see it once and twice and three. I've watched it 3 times now.
Wow.
I really want to watch it again on IMAX if I ever have the chance, because I'm sure it will be a really great experience. Although I saw it on the projector, but I feel the film is 2 hours and a half long. I feel like it's a bit too long for me personally. You guys know on the podcast, I always have a bit of a problem with long films. We've had this discussion on Dune, and we had this discussion on The Batman. I kind of think I prefer like more tight experiences, films that become a bit tighter and are smaller. I thought 2 hours would be the perfect fit for this film. And I think that halfway through the film, my jaw was open when I saw the film the first time, you know, like I was blown away and overwhelmed by the look of it and by what was happening on the screen, to a point that I was so distracted sometimes I wasn't even following the story. I was just distracted by the 8mm lenses and all of the displacements, the black and white, the film, all of it was really distracting. And I think halfway through the film becomes a bit more normal, becomes a bit more like a regular film.
Well, the reason for that is that she is growing up to be a normal adult, or at least a teenager in her brain capacity. And I think that's the whole point of the film, that it becomes more run-of-the-mill, whereas at the beginning, she's basically a baby.
I know. But I feel like, to the same style that I love on David Lynch's films, which can become incomprehensible from the start to finish, I feel that the film developed this amazing language, and I hope that it would stick with that language until the end.
You wanted it to be absurdist the whole way through.
The whole time, until the end. And I know that would have been a challenge. I know this would have been a challenge, and probably wouldn't have been as popular as it was now, and the film is doing really well, and I know that would have been a problem, but I felt that from the flair of his other films, he usually sticks with the same style until the very end, and it becomes absurd. The same way The Favorite, until the very end, it stays dark and ominous and quite horrible, actually, until all the very end. This film kind of switches to a more regular movie, and I mean, I liked it, but kind of lost the charm for me at the end, and you know, I hope that I think you did it. You said it even better than me. The absurd of all of it would have been nice.
Yeah, and the absurdity is people are awkwardly, the audience, at least mine was, awkwardly laughing for half an hour, if not longer, and then realizing that it sucked you in, and it's an analysis of humanity, right? And how absurd it is, the things that we do, and how absurd are relationships, and how men treat women, and how, you know, how normal prostitution is in society. Like all these things that Yorgos is kind of commenting on, that you can take as a big deal, or you can just watch the scenery. It's that kind of film, right? But in terms of length, I mean, I feel like they stayed in France a bit long, maybe, in the film.
You're probably right.
But the sort of twist of her old former husband getting her and stealing her back, I like that. And seeing Emma Stone grow, like, how good is Emma Stone?
She's amazing
in this film?
She's amazing. I think she's going to win the Oscar. I hope so, because I think she deserves it. She's amazing on the film. Yeah. You really feel the baby in the beginning. You feel the teenager times, then you feel an adult, and then actually a very proper, almost British-like person that talks sounds like poetry talking. So it's really a change. I can't believe, and we know how a film is made. Films are usually made not in order. It's quite fascinating how she actually managed to do this.
Oh my God!
Because
unless they didn't film it linearly, we don't know. But she's just, and I really like moments where it felt like she knew what she was doing, and then she would sort of revert back into that more baby brain way, and as would be normal. I mean, just the whole thinking about what this film is just insane, right? And then I love that they went and tried to do it, like the doctor professor. They tried to do it again with another girl.
And it didn't really.
And it didn't work. I mean, how good is that?
No, and the whole atmosphere of the film, the odds to Frankenstein and the odds to Dracula, the whole thing, it has this really has a huge journey. It starts like a Frankenstein movie, almost like an Orson Welles Hitchcock movie. And then it kind of jumps into an absurd, especially the Portuguese section. It's a very like Brazil, like Terry Gilliam style Monty Python almost thing. And I found it fascinating how he made these versions of these countries, because, being from Portugal myself, I know Lisbon really well. We lived in Lisbon many years, me and Anna. And it's funny how he synthesized Lisbon to one thing, to the most colorful side of Lisbon. I love the fact that they have the pastéis de nata, the tarts, which are really famous in Portugal. Then they have the fado, the musician, and then also that color, the bright color that you get when it's really sunny in summer in Portugal. And also the absurdity of it is all people screaming a bit and people a bit upset, a bit like the Italians. He really captured Lisbon. I thought it was fascinating how he captured it.
It's almost the best bit of the film is the fantastical nature of it. Yet we're absolutely believing Emma Stone and the other characters' performance. Like of course it's all intended and intentional, but you think it might not work, and it does. Like the boat they're on is just absurdist. The skies are absurdist. The backdrops are crazy. But we are looking at those things and we're engaged by them, but we're just so into the story that a realistic setting probably wouldn't have worked, would it?
No. It would have. It would not work, and especially the steampunk mixture. You have these I love this horse that is a fake horse attached to a carriage, and then it has like a steampunk engine at the end. It's really this merging and melting potting of a lot of styles, and you can't really tell, is the film on the 18th century? Is it the 20th century? Is it the 21st century? Yeah. It's just this mixture of styles, and I completely agree with you. If they would have just went to Lisbon normally, or if they would have just went to
London or Paris,
it wouldn't have worked. It had to have this atmosphere. For sure.
I don't have the names handy, but as I understand it, there are two production designers or art directors, and they are actually quite different. One is from a more fashion, point of view, and one is from a traditional film point of view. And I feel like that's deliberate. Yeah. Like there's this clash, because production design sometimes is all very practical, like how are we going to build the sets to film it. And the other side of it is the design side. So please look up the production designers.
Yeah, I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know that. That makes so much sense now. Like, I'm just like thinking about it. It makes so much sense. But no, I just, it's going to take me a while to digest this film. And I really don't even feel that this podcast will give it justice. I feel like I really recommend everyone to watch the film again, because I think it's a really different experience seeing it the second time. Yeah. Mainly because the first time you're just overwhelmed by it, and you don't even know what you're watching. And then the second time you actually have more time to see the story, to see the acting, to see the wonderful performances from William Dafoe and from Mark Ruffalo as well, and they do a stunning performance as well in the film. And you have more time to appreciate the little details. And I felt like that's that kind of film. It's a film that it will grow, and it will be. I think, like all of his films, Yorgos' films, I think it's going to become a cult classic, just like The Favorite will become. I just feel that it has so many layers and it's so timeless. And
Yes, finally, on the actors, I love Emma Stone. I love Willem Dafoe in this. I think Mark Ruffalo is amazing. However, there are two recent projects where I think Mark Ruffalo was allowed to do some kind of accent on his own. And the accent in this film does not work, in my opinion. And he's also in this series called All the Light You Cannot See. Have you watched that?
I've seen some clips of it. I know what you mean.
And that accent is off the charts wrong.
You should just be...
my God.
You shouldn't try too hard.
So let's never listen to Mark Ruffalo in those two projects again. But he, as an actor in this project, I love it. And he's pathetic in Poor Things, as in his character is pathetic.
I have to say this because I was watching this with Anna. We watched it the first time, the two of us, and she loves this director as well. And the first thing she said when she heard Willem Dafoe was like, "Is he trying to be Scottish? What's going on there?"
He is trying to be Scottish,
but he's not. He's not managing, man. It's not working.
Emma's works amazingly, but fine. Everyone else is a bit. And part of that is because they're playing.
Willem Dafoe is Willem Dafoe. He always sounds like Willem Dafoe. Yeah. So if you try to have him like that, it doesn't really work if you think about it.
The bohemian nature of this setting maybe is the point. Is Mark's meant to have gone to these exotic places? Mark's character. And maybe even Willem Dafoe as well, who seems to be in London or somewhere else compared to where he's brought up. Anyway, we probably shouldn't spend half an hour talking about accents.
No, but I'm also really glad. I just remember I was looking at my notes, and I completely forgot to say as well that you were talking, just going a little bit back about the production design. There's another thing as well, which is the costume design of the film as well, which is very linked, of course, with the production design as well. Yeah. And I really found the costume fascinating. The way, well, first of all, Emma, of course, she has some stunning dresses on the film, especially very, very much odds to Alice in Wonderland, especially in Lisbon. She's dressed like Alice, which is stunning. It's really, really cool. But it's like a Yorgos way. Like she has like shorts and she has like big balloon arms, and it's kind of like Alice, but like a more awkward, ridiculized version of Alice. It's really funny.
But don't you think, Hugo, some parents dress their babies ridiculously? I actually think it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek
could be that
thing. I mean, clearly
you're probably right. There's a part of the film that she wants to punch the baby. Remember that? It's like she's getting him like, I need to punch this baby.
It's outlandish on purpose, but some of it is like, well, have you seen what and in Victorian times or
that's right. That's right. Yeah. They looked ridiculous. They looked absolutely. I didn't even realize that. No, I
maybe.
Well, one last thing before we jump into the VFX and before we jump into the lenses and the cameras, I just have to say as well, just a little shout out to the music. The soundtrack, I've been obsessed with it. I've been hearing it on Apple Music. It's available there. It's also available on Amazon Music as well, and on Shopify, Spotify, and everything. So this is from I'm sure I'm not going to mispronounce it. Jerkin Fendrix, right? Is that how I say that?
I'm not sure. Jerkin Fendrix, maybe something like that.
Jerkin Fendrix, okay, maybe like that. His soundtrack is amazing. This is his first soundtrack.
What?
He's really young. He has a band, so he's not usually the soundtrack. He doesn't usually soundtracks. I think he's like 20 something. Okay. Yeah. So he's 20. So he's 28. He's really, really young, and his soundtrack is just haunting. And I'm obsessed with it because it's such a character on the film. Such a character. I couldn't believe how good it is. And I really recommend people listening to it, because especially the way it travels through the film, because it starts like a very much almost like a horror movie. And then when you have the Frankenstein bit, when she is alive, when you have that moment, it becomes like a very noisy soundtrack. And then it gets this, when we go to Portugal, it has all these Portuguese influences from Portuguese traditional music. You know when they're dancing, which is, this film has another amazing dancing sequence, just like The Favorite. That section, the sounds that they're making and the guitars and the horn section is just like the traditional 17th century Portuguese, 18th century Portuguese music, but with the twist of modern. Right. So it's almost like you went to Portugal or probably heard a lot of Portuguese music and then recreated this kind of Portuguese pastiche, this Portuguese melting of modern pop with the old. I loved it. I thought the music was astonishing.
I did too, and I've only seen the film once, so I'm not sure I know the soundtrack as well as you, but we rarely talk about music on the VFX Note show, so it really must have had a lot of influence.
Oh man, I don't usually hear soundtracks, like soundtracks are not something that you, because they're too attached to the film, and you kind of, we were talking about this when you came in this morning, like I think the film is going to clean up on the Oscars, it's going to win a lot.
I think so, I personally think it's going to be a big battle between this and Oppenheimer. Again, like completely different.
It's funny,
films,
isn't it? Because it's like the classical, the absolute classical Hollywood movie versus the absurd artistic creation. Yeah, yes. Maybe they'll split it. Maybe they'll give the Oscar to one. Maybe they'll win Best Picture and then the Oscar director goes to Oppenheimer. It could be that sometimes when they have a really strong year, they end up splitting it because the vote is so close.
Absolutely.
So it could be.
Yeah. So. Well, and we'll get to visual effects later, but I also think this has that, dark horse side of. As long as it gets into the Bake-Off, we're recording.
It's the ex machina factor.
It's been at the Bake-Off. We're recording it a couple of days after the Bake-Off. We don't know what the final nominees are yet.
But it has. We've talked about this a few times. It has that ex machina factor. That the film that comes from the back. Like the one that just comes in.
And more of a crowd pleaser, I suppose, in that way. And that's why sometimes Academy members are interested in rewarding a film like that.
And especially now, like people are a bit fed up of Marvel, a bit fed up of DC Comics, and all the debacle with Barbie, with no VFX, and Oppenheimer with no VFX, all these things, and Mission Impossible as well. And then Indiana Jones, people are a bit fed up of that. I'm not sure the other films have a chance. I might be wrong, but I feel personally it's between this and The Creator. I think that's the race, I think so.
Yes, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3
could be as well.
Has this factor where they haven't won a visual effects Oscar for a while, Marvel, and it's amazing creature work. So we'll see. But that's by the by.
I know what you mean. But I definitely think those three will be on the final nominees for sure. It might not win, but I think it will be on the nominees. Because it tends to be like that. When a film has 10, I'm assuming it will have like 10 nominations because of the actors, because of the script, and because of the set design and all of that, and even the music. It might even have 12, 13 nominations. And usually that film also gets the VFX nomination, usually. Because
but this year there's no Oppenheimer, so therefore it probably...
And no Dune as well.
Dune.
So it's a different... I'm not saying it's luckier for them. And last year was Avatar, which also... it was going to be impossible to compete with that as well. So yeah, it might have a chance. I hope it does. But let's just... Should we jump into the way it was shot? Because I know this is not a cinematography podcast, but I thought that the look of this film was stunning. And the DOP of this film was Robbie Ryan. He's been doing. He's not a very old DOP. He's not been around for a long time, but he's made some astonishing films, and including he won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography with The Favorite, which is also, sorry the pun, one of my favorite films of that year. It was really good as well. It
just had a certain style to the work in terms of the camera doing pans, I call them, but they're obviously more than that. That people remembered from The Favorite, right?
And the naturalistic lighting as well, because it had a lot of natural light coming from windows. So it kind of was, for me at the time, it was a mixture of Stanley Kubrick's angles, weird angles from Clock Orange, but then the natural lighting of candle lighting and natural lighting, again, a bit inspired by Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. So I actually feel like Yorgos and also this DOP must be very influenced by Kubrick's work, because there's a lot of resonance with with the wide lenses and the wide angles that they use. And on this film, they went, they were like here, and now they went to 2000 with that. The angles and the lens work, and this film has such a distinct look to it.
Well, it's shot on 35 mil,
Yes,
right? That's
yeah.
maybe the one.
Like The Favorite was as well before.
And there's.
I think all of his films are 35. He's a film guy. He always does in film. Yeah. Lobster was 35 as well. So I think he's always shot in film. I couldn't find anything about digital with him. I don't think he's used digital yet. So I don't think so.
That already sets the film apart from what else is out in the past year. And not only that, there was an aspect ratio part of this as well that is different than other films, right?
Yeah, exactly. And which I love as well. It's like closer to a 4:3, which is also the aspect ratio that Wes Anderson uses a lot as well. It's also the aspect ratio that Kubrick used to use as well, quite a lot, especially on The Shining, and especially on Eyes Wide Shut. He used that because famously Kubrick would frame to that aspect because of TV as well, so that the films would work on TV and also on the cinema. I'm not sure it's because of that. I think it's because, to be fair, I think a squared frame, I like it a lot as well. And I always try to use a squared frame whenever I can. Even though the last thing I did was on squared format as well for Zeiss. And I love that format, and I love these cameras these days have that option. But as a digital film, you just open the gate. That's the thing.
Why does it work here, do you think? My takeaway is that it possibly puts you back into that era a bit more, which is whatever we think that era is.
Yeah, the Orson Welles, Hitchcock era, which films were open gate 45. And I feel there's a nostalgic factor for sure, and I'm sure that's why they're doing it. I mean, there are people that growed up with those films, but there's also like an intimacy in those films, because when you have anamorphic, very wide lenses, you somehow feel more far away from the action. Sure. Especially if you look at older action movies like Die Hard, or it's always Panavision, always anamorphic, and you're always on a 50 mil, a 70 mil, you're quite far away. On these films, you're on a 12 mil, a 16 mil, an 8 mil, a 4, you're right there. And you see the whole body, because it's a squared format. You usually on regular Panavision films, you don't usually see below the belt, you don't usually see the legs, you don't usually see a lot of top room. And on this way, you see the legs, and it really works. Especially the film has a lot of bodies, it has a lot of sex. It works because you feel like you're there.
Occasionally, again, intentional, especially with the 8mm lens shots. I kind of felt like I was spying on her life, right? Like, and you're watching her go through the house. There's like animals in the background. She's dragging something, big long dress, or you're in a weird city. And in that wide angle view, you're much more like an observer. That's your point, I think, is that
exactly.
You're not necessarily that close to the action, but you're almost watching her life in a different way than a film observer. A film audience.
Absolutely.
And it really had the effect of that.
It did. And that's, of course, I have a little surprise to the audience here. I set up like an 8mm lens for us here. and the funny, it's like, just like you said, this is of course not that lens, but it's a similar lens. This is a Canon 8mm, which has been cropped a bit because the sensor crops it, but it's exactly like you see there. It looks like a surveillance camera. It looks like you're watching someone that you shouldn't be watching. You're like an outside party looking in. And I think that's exactly the thing. And now regarding this 8mm lens that they've used on the film, as soon as I saw the film, it immediately reminded me of 2001. Because on 2001, when Al 9000 is looking at the astronauts, you have that exact angle. And you're like, oh, because that's his vision. And Kubrick at the time did that in purpose so that you would separate and people would know that it was Al watching or someone else. And it worked really well back then in the 60s. Now, the funny thing is, as I researched, I really recommend people reading I have that here. Really recommend people reading I really recommend people reading the American Cinematography this issue. I know it doesn't have Poor Things; it has Napoleon on the cover, but it has a really extensive article about Poor Things, about the lens work and the film work as well. And I really recommend people watching that. But funny enough, in researching this, as soon as I realized, oh, that looks like a 2001 lens, and then I discovered that was the 2001 lens, and I'm like,
Amazing.
what? I was just shocked. So this lens is very famous. It's a Nikkor 8mm f-stop of 3.2 ultra wide, and it's basically a very old lens that has been rehoused by a company called Oppenheimer. Which is funny that it's called Oppenheimer, the company. So it's a really, really old lens. I believe the lens is from the 40s, and it's been rehoused to be modern so that you can have the PL lens. And I went to the website of this company, and you can rent it. You can rent the actual AL 9000 Kubrick lens.
Which is what we'll be doing next week. No.
I don't even imagine. It doesn't have a price. It says call.
Cool.
So this entire thing was quite fascinating because the film uses very unusual lenses. I mean, like they use this 8mm, of course. They also have these really old lenses from Petzval, which are full-frame lenses from the 19th century. And these lenses have been rehoused by Lomography to 2014. And so these are all like basically lenses from the 19th century, also, of course, from the 20th century, very old. They've been, of course, rehoused and cleaned so that they could operate on a modern set. But they give you this beautiful bouquets. They give you like these beautiful round shapes around and behind them. And not to mention when you're walking down the street, especially these London scenes, you see the street kind of warping around. And they're just beautiful. And I felt like it's fascinating to see a DOP and a director really experimenting like this.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think sometimes you go, I'll watch a more art house film and I'll see that they have the opportunity to use some degraded lenses or old school lenses or other approaches which feel a bit like they've thought them up in film school or they're referencing an old film. And they don't always, what I'm really saying is they don't always match the story.
Yes.
Here, it's
like
spot on, clearly.
Like a glove.
And it's part of the absurdity stuff. It's the era.
Yeah.
It's the, you just don't know what you're watching.
Yeah.
I also think there's clearly a trend amongst cinematographers to go back to what could be considered dirtier.
Yeah.
Like, we can get amazing images out of a Red and an Arri Alexa and Sony camera and everything, and the lenses are amazing too.
Oh yeah, man.
They want it to be a bit more screwed up, right?
And this is a common discussion between cinematographers. Like, if you go back and listen to the podcast from Roger Deakins, he talks a lot about this. He's exactly the opposite. He loves clean images.
Right.
He never does that. He always uses the sharpest Zeiss lens they can find.
Yeah.
He uses the sharpest camera he can find. And actually, Zeiss has done lenses like that, which is so sharp, and there's no distortion, there's nothing. The lens is like, there's no chromatic aberration, there's nothing. And that's a very clinical, non-distracting lens, which I completely get for his work, because his films are all about the acting, all about the drama, especially the work they do with the Coen brothers. It's all about that story.
Except
it's not to distract.
He can dirty it up with lighting and the production design.
Yes.
But there's something that DOP... Like, even in big visual effects films, I remember the second Black Panther... The DOP there, Autumn is her name. They just use some old lenses because we're going underwater and we need to dirty up the CG as well. That's a side of what some DOPs want to do. And I would say most of the audience for a Black Panther film ain't going to notice that. But when I rewatched that film, I was like, oh yes, I see what you're doing there. And it did give a more impressive quality to the image. So that's a big visual effects film. Yeah. This isn't one, even though there's a lot of visual effects in it. And it just works for the story. It just works.
It does. It does. And I really love how these lenses give a language to it and give it like I don't know. It's a je ne sais quoi. It's an extra layer of chromatics and distortion that really play well to this absurd story, especially in the beginning, because they've mostly used the 8mm and the very, very, very wide lenses at the very beginning of the film, which makes perfect sense. You know, they even have a 4mm lens on the film, which is even more pin-up looking. You know, it's almost like you're looking through the, you know, when you look
Pinhole.
through the, pinhole, exactly, that's the word, the pinhole. But then there's also like a lot of really cool work with really far away lenses. They have these amazing zoom lenses that they've used, especially they have this ARRI Zoom Ultra Prime Master Zoom, which is a 16mm to 110mm, and they have a lot of these zooms where they are like really far away. They keep zooming and zooming and zooming and zooming and zooming, and they just keep going. And so I really feel that this film deserves like a thesis. It deserves like to be studied, because it's one of the best options. I don't think I've, lately at least, I don't think I've seen a film where the language of its lenses are so well picked for the parts of the story. So well picked, and which is astonishing how they do not distract, and they just fit so well. Because normally, if you think about having a 4mm or an 8mm lens in the middle of a normal film, it's like they sometimes have parts where they're talking on the dinner table, and there's a 50mm, and then there's a 35, and there's a normal lenses, and then they jump to this 8mm, and then they jump back to the 35, and then they jump back to a 12mm. It should be jarring. It should, but it isn't.
But it
just works.
It's part of the unease you feel watching this film. The slow zoom-ins are uneasy to watch, for example. Did I also remember not just lens changes and camera angle changes, but actual film? Yeah. Like, it's color and black and white, right? Yeah, exactly. So tell me what you've learned more about the black and white side of the film.
So I've learned that this was quite an odyssey. So basically, they wanted to use this really old film stock that is not for sale anymore. You know, Kodak still has film stock, of course, because a lot of directors will use Kodak, but there's a lot of stocks that are gone. You know, they've managed to convince Kodak to do this Ektachrome film, which is called Easton W 5222 Ektachrome 10D. It has a really weird name, and so they found this studio in Berlin, like this lab called a Film Technique in Berlin, that could process this. And so this is like really old school, and that's why on the beginning of the film, it kind of reminds you of Hitchcock movies. It reminds you of Orson Welles movies, because they're not just using the same cameras, which are the Aricam ST and the Bocam and the Aricam LT, but they're actually using the stock from that time. So that's why the film looks exactly like those films at the time. And this is a fascinating exercise, because 25% of the film is filmed with a stock, and that's a pretty big endeavor. That's like me now deciding, oh, I'm going to go into a film and I'm going to get a Betamax camera from the 80s and do the whole film with that. It's a very tricky thing to do on a modern film. It's a very tricky thing, especially because you don't have labs, you don't have people that even know what they're like. The expertise is gone. These people are retired now. It's a quite tricky thing.
Yeah, I imagine another obvious tricky thing is shooting it in black and white. Means you can't bring it back to color if you wanted to. I mean, so what I assume happens a lot of the time is they shoot it on color film and grade it to black and white, and it gives you a bit of flexibility. In the edit. Maybe it was always intended to be a black and white section of the film you're filming, but you've got to like make the decision early, you know, and commit, right? Exactly. That's obviously what they've done.
I mean, it's funny enough that you say that. It's funny, people think it's a bit weird, but you know, if you look at ARRI, they have a black and white version of the ARRI Alexa. There's an ARRI Alexa with a black and white sensor, which, because it only has one, because usually the sensors have the 3 colors, the RGB, and because it only has one sensor, it actually is sharper and more detailed than the other ones, because it only has to process one color, so the bandwidth is larger, so it actually produces a much better image, but in black and white. So there's a lot of directors doing those kind of things, but I know what you mean. It's a commitment thing, but also like you have to find the expertise of the people that still know how to do this. I mean, because they have to process the whole thing.
Yes, and the film to compare it to is Oppenheimer, which also had color black and white sequences, and again they had to commit.
And it's film as well. It's a good. That's a good point to make. No, I feel that this is a podcast of itself. Like this
Welcome to VFX Notes.
The American Cinematographer. I really advise people to read it. It's a very good article. It also has an article about the VFX as well. And I feel like in this man, I have to praise this magazine is amazing. I've been like, I just find it fascinating that we still have a publication like this, and it's a shame that we lost Cinefx because it was kind of the same for VFX, but we have new ones now, right? We have the Before and Afters magazine, which is coming back. But yeah, no, I feel that this is a discussion of itself, and I could spend hours talking about this. I made a lot of notes about it, and there's even mistakes in the film that were made because of these cameras. Like,
what's a mistake?
There's a really funny part, like when she wakes up and her eyes open. When you have the Frankenstein part, if you notice really closely, her eyes open on a very, very weird way. Almost her eyes are retimed or something. Oh. Looks like she's like opening one and then opening the other. So it looks like either she was acting like that, or they were spinning, or they were doing retiming. Actually, that was an accident, because they had to power these cameras. These cameras are film cameras. There was a problem with the power supply, and so the film started running slower. And they only discovered that later. And then they put it on the film. That was just an organic mistake. It worked really well. It was just like exactly on that moment, then she woke up the eyes. And I'm like, that's so, how lucky is that for that to happen? Because they would have never decided to do that probably afterwards.
That's amazing.
The film, yeah, like I said, like the film has, I think that I would love to do an entire video about this film. And maybe I will. Maybe I will do a video about these lenses and about because I like this. I like this I do that as well. I buy a lot of weird lenses, and I buy a lot of strange lenses, like you noticed. And I like to experiment that way, because it just gives a different look to things. And but yeah, I'm gonna shut up now about the lenses and about the film. I really advise people to go and read it. Read the magazine, and also there's other articles on the web about this as well, and I'm sure we'll see more and more coming out, I'm sure, because now the film will be most likely nominated.
Well, as we're recording it, this film was only released in England last week. And I got to see an early screening at the film school in Australia months ago, which was in 35mm, which was important, I think. But most people will see this digitally.
You saw it on 35?
Yeah, incredible.
I saw the Visual Effects Society screening, because when I went screener, because the film wasn't out when we started researching for the film, for the podcast. It's out now, but it wasn't out at the time. Yeah. I don't believe there is a 35mm version of the film on the cinema, probably not. But the Visual Effects Society screener is quite high quality, because it's on Disney Plus encoding. So it's actually really high quality. You see the grain, and you see the whole thing. So I was quite impressed by that. I've noticed later, watching clips, on YouTube and elsewhere, that you can still see the grain and all that. And I've it's something nice to hold on to. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get to the visual effects, but they've done such a great job of integrating to that grain, and integrating to the crazy camera lenses and movement. Like, that's not an easy job to do in some of those VFX shots.
And that must have been a nightmare, but also a huge challenge. And that's a really good segue. I mean, let's start talking about the VFX, because the VFX are not, like you said, it's not a lot, but it's still quite a lot. There's still quite a lot of VFX on the film, but they are very special types of VFX, I think, and and also there's this struggle with these lenses, because to replicate the bokeh and replicate the distortion is so difficult. But majority of the visual effects, of course, there's a lot of set extension on the film, especially a lot of the sets were built, especially the Lisbon sets and especially the London sets, and they're only built on the first floor, and then the rest is an extension. So that's probably where we could start.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, okay. So
get
ready for an Ian rant.
Rant. Oh.
Of some degree. There are some films, period films, or even when they're sort of designed in a certain way, that I have seen in recent times, that to me feel like they were just shot in a film studio, because they were, right? And so sometimes when you don't go outside the film studio and either you're filming against amazing backdrops or sets, or you're, filming against green screen, or you're doing set extensions, it can still feel like a very interior set made film. There is something about this film, Poor Things, where because it's absurd and because they have, backgrounds that are constantly moving, that sort of thing, clouds and skies and the ocean, it never feels like an interior film, even though it was shot in Hungary, in some very old studios as far as I understand it, which meant, they were sort of limited to what they could make. I'm just making the point that sometimes visual effects are used to, we've got to broaden the world of the film. And sometimes it's an impossible thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to name some of the films I've seen that
I don't know
have
what
that
you mean.
feeling. But
I know what you mean.
Here, it doesn't feel like that at all.
No, I know what you mean. Because you get that layer of light wrapping and glowing and the sky, and then the buildings are a bit too long, and you can kind of tell, that wasn't photographed.
But I do wonder, and I don't know this for sure, whether they were worried about that and they decided to adopt some LED wall volume filmmaking to either help encompass the make the actors feel a bit more like there was something going on outside that world, to help with interactive lighting, which is very useful to do. In the end, it's possible that they didn't necessarily use a lot of those backgrounds that are live LED wall backgrounds. I don't think they were real-time backgrounds. They were pre-rendered things, and there's different scenes, Lisbon, the ocean, lots of other scenes in the film that used LED walls. But it did have the effect of fitting in with the mysterious, absurdist, crazy nature, but probably also giving the actors a good view about what actually will be there, even if it's replaced later. Absolutely. So there is something about the LED wall side of this film, which is a visual effects thing now, and it encompasses so many other things, production design, cinematography, that just worked for me. Yeah. Even though I know we've probably read or we've probably seen that they replaced a lot of the background.
Yeah, so I've just recently saw it on the Visual Effects Society judging event, which they did replace some of the shots. And I think that's normal because there's so many problems. You have the moe effect, and you have the lighting is not powerful enough. And when I saw the breakdown, actually, you can clearly see that I know why they replaced it, because the lighting of the sky was not powerful enough.
Sure.
It wasn't strong enough to, and you saw the plate and you see, it's not punching enough. And also it must have been a creative decision, because some of the skies are a bit different as well, and the clouds are in different places. But like you said, it's absolutely necessary for the actors to have it there, and also for framing and everything. And also, to be honest, like it has all to do with this kind of film, because this film is trying to tapping in to a nostalgic time where films were made in a different way, but also bringing in new things to it. But, rear projection was a typical thing. And I feel like it makes sense for them to use rear projection, because that's how Hitchcock would have done it, or Kubrick would have done it,
I think the original thinking, which I don't actually know, was, this is a painted backdrop type film. Yeah. But no matter how you do painted backdrops, they're going to be static. Yeah. Unless enhanced by visual effects. So why not jump on what clearly must have been the bandwagon of LED wall filmmaking here, and let it not necessarily drive the shots, because they weren't doing any kind of unreal, live kind of stuff that we're used to, say, with Mandalorian. They were doing pre-rendered backgrounds. Yeah. And using it for the things that we've already talked about, interactive lighting, and just immersing the characters in there. But it still has that old school feel. Yeah. There's some behind the scenes that I'm sure Hugo will be showing while we're talking, that show that the LED wall backgrounds look a bit like static backdrops that might normally have been painted on these big cycloramas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. And there's a second article on the American cinematography just about the LED screens, which are huge, by the way. This is a humongous 20,000 pixel long 10-bit color thing. I believe there's 150 panels on this thing, according to the American cinematography. Don't quote me on that. That's what they've posted in, and I think it's like 197 feet by 37. It's huge. It's absolutely huge because they're around this kind of physical set of the boat. And no, it makes perfect sense for the type of film they're making. I don't think they ever thought this was going to look real. That was not the objective at all. I think that was not the same way that the set extensions in CG, the ones in London and the ones in Paris, especially in Paris, there's some breakdowns where you see the buildings are just built to the first floor, and then the entire second floor and third is CG. Then you also have CG in the front. Like that's the CG on this film is highly stylized. Like in Lisbon, you see that with the merging of models and CG and practical photography merged with some CG. It's never meant to be photoreal. That was not the intent, I think, and especially in London because it's in black and white. It's never expected to look any better. I think that's the way it should look.
Yeah, and you mentioned models there. That was a surprise to me. After watching the film, I've guessed maybe that they might have done something for London or Tower Bridge, but to see so many models built for Lisbon, the boat, the bridge, as I understand it, they were built by local Hungarian companies, a few different ones, and they totally work, and sometimes they don't work. And the visual effects studio will eventually get to them, Union, had to basically use scans of these miniatures to extend, replace, do interactive lighting, as is very normal.
Exactly.
But it's this thing where clearly Yorgos and the filmmakers wanted something there as the base. Yeah. And that's almost back to the LED wall thing. That's what it can be. It can be the base. Absolutely. And then you build up on top of it.
And augmented. Yeah. And this is definitely the approach. They've enhanced the models and made it even better in CG. And, I need to credit the director and the producers and the entire production. They never pretended that there was no CG. They never said that it was all for real. They've been very clear, been very open. The articles are very open. They say that there's CG, there's breakdowns, there's the bake-off will, of course, show even more things, but this is how it should be done. It's a merging of all departments. You have the props department, you have the models department, you have the CG department, the cinematography, and they're all working together to the vision of the director, and no one is driving anyone under the bus. Everyone is just working together, and I really find that's really gonna, especially on this year where we had a lot of bad examples on that sense with the no CGI BS. I feel that this is a breath of fresh air, and shout out to Union. I mean, Union did an amazing job. Shout out to Union and shout out to Lucy Cooper. Hi, Lucy. And I really think they did an astonishing job with the VFX on this film. I'm sure they're over the moon by being on the bake-off. And
Union is a relatively small shop. I guess we'd call it a mid-sized shop. Or I don't know what they are these days. They're probably boutique. Yeah. Simon Hughes was the visual effects supervisor. In the past, Union has just become known as this invisible effects shop. It's just become a bit of a specialty on, I would say, art house films. Yeah. And, so Poor Things was like the perfect fit. But here, they actually did quite a lot. Now, we've mentioned these pre-rendered backgrounds for the LED walls. They did, of course, the animals. Yeah. These are these Frankenstein stitched together chickens with a donkey or
a bulldog with the chicken.
Oh my God!
With the duck.
But actually, just on those, Hugo, it's the same sort of thing that we've been talking about, which is they're not completely CG. Yeah. They're actually real plates of two different animals stitched together. There's definitely a CG side of them. I mean, as I understand it, they've scanned the animals and. Yeah. They need to do the stitch seam, and maybe there's some reanimation there. Get it? But possibly it's more coming from the director that is like, well, I don't want you to go and make a CG chicken bull. Why don't we shoot a chicken and a bull and see what you can do in terms of compositing to piece it together.
Well, most likely they I mean, I don't know the details. I haven't really seen a lot of breakdowns, but I'm assuming they've merged as much as they could with the real plates, and then sometimes they might have to do a takeover in CG, or like they do with doubles, you know, like they do with stunts, like they would move to the CG and then move back to the plate and then move. It probably was like that.
But if
it makes sense.
Yeah, and if you've got a goat and a chicken, a duck that you need to merge together, the weird walk cycle that you'd end up with actually again fits the film.
It does, yeah.
Whereas maybe if you were tasked, I gave a 3D artist the task of doing a duck goat, they would come up with a thing that they do, right?
Yeah.
So it just worked here. I love those animal shots in particular, partly because they're mostly in black and white.
Yeah, they are. I think they're never in color. No, I know what you are.
Something amazing about those.
And again, the animation can look crude, and the whole thing can look really strange, because that's the whole point. Because of course, if the chicken has a dog head, the gravity center is off. And so she's like trying to hold on to try to not fall down. And so it even makes even cooler. The hand animation done there is particularly amazing. Hats off to Union. I hope they get nominated. It would be so amazing if they get nominated. Even better if they win, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm sure everyone there at the studio and Lucy would be so happy if that would happen. I'm really rooting for them. I really think they deserve all the praise, and because I love, we've had this discussion many times on the podcast. I love when films are a bit smaller and they have a more creative and more unique vision to them. And I think this, for me, my love of this started when Ex Machina won the Oscar for VFX, where on that year there was so much competition, but Ex Machina was that perfect hybrid of a story that needed that VFX to work. And this is another situation like that.
When Ex Machina won the visual effects Oscar, there was not open criticism, but like hush-hush discussion about how the work is amazing, but it's not VFX Oscar level amazing.
Yeah.
And I, of course, disagree, because it was like vital for the story.
Exactly.
And if you had half-assed work done for that film, it just wouldn't have had the impact it had. And you just believed Alicia Vikander was this robot, right?
Exactly.
It's the same thing with Poor Things, not just those animals, but like the fantastical nature of that cruise ship at sea isn't going to be convincing enough just to be a model, or actually even a real plate of some boat they could do. There's an art-directed side to the visual effects of those shots, right? And even when they're just walking out on the deck, it just works to art direct, but I say art direct in the visual effects sense, what the starry skies are doing or what the ocean's doing. So, as we always do, Hugo, in VFX Notes podcast, we're heaping praise on the VFX. But what I really mean is that they're not just doing VFX at the end in post just to get the shot done. Simon and the team at Union were a key part of these shot designs. Yeah.
And that's why I think it might get nominated and it might win, because no disrespect to the other films, but I do think that these days, and this is a problem with society, not just with VFX, too much emphasis is on quantity, and people tend to confuse that, it has 3,000 shots, should get the Oscar. But quantity is nothing over quality, and it's not about the photorealism, because photorealism comes and goes, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, photorealism. When you look at, Scorpion King once was photorealistic, and now it looks ridiculous, and it's ridiculized as a meme. So I feel like the hunt for photorealism is a problem, I think, for the industry, because you'll get there, and then 5 years later, a new engine comes, and then it looks better. And then 5 years comes, and it looks better. You're basically racing around a circle. You're never getting there, and there will always be something better. This film will survive the test of time, because the visual effects are not meant to be photoreal, but they are also not meant to be like a regular Marvel movie with 3,000 shots. When you look at this film in 30 years from now, like we look at films from the 90s and in the 2000s, you will look at it the same way you look at the film now. You'll never really be dissuaded by the VFX. Oh, that looks a bit shit. You'll never reach that point because the VFX of this film are so merged into the story and the look of it that it's all a package.
Yeah.
And I think that's what should win the Oscar. It's a film that does that. That's why I think that the other
visual
ones...
effects?
Yes, because the other ones is quantity. Okay. Oh, we did 3,000 shots. Oh, we did 20 creatures. Oh, we did 5 spaceships.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, you know, are you really contributing to the cinema or to the movement of movie
Oh,
making?
I totally agree. The only thing is, which sounds like a counter argument, but is not. There is this thing that happens with visual effects awards, and in the Oscar is the big one, but in others, where just as we go on and on about the marketing of a film where they don't want to mention CG, it can also heavily benefit a film in its visual effects Oscar race or VES award race for the film to use multiple techniques.
Yes.
Now, what I'm getting at is there are some films in the past where they really did push the practical effects side of it, and it probably got it over the line because they happened to use a miniature. And, you know, a voting block audience likes hearing some of the old school methods used. Now, I'm saying Poor Things fits the bill.
Yeah.
It's got LED walls, that's brand new. It's got lots of digital work because it's visual effects, but it's got miniatures. It's got painted backdrops. It's got matte paintings. Yeah. They might be digital.
Very old lenses, film. It's in film as well,
And in terms of practical effects, this isn't part of the award, but it is Willem Dafoe's makeup.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is not part of the visual effects Oscar race, but oh my God, it's incredible, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This film just feels a bit more practical than your bigger Marvel films.
It does.
I think there were some Chris Nolan films in the past that won Oscars where they just played up a little bit more the practical side of it.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Inception is one of those cases, and I mean, Dunkirk ended up not winning, but it could have.
I don't think Dunkirk got into the 5, but it was definitely pushed its practical side.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think I'm just I say this a lot on the podcast. I feel like artistic endeavor and trying to push the medium forward, for me personally, will always be, for me, the way to move forward in cinema. And because I look back at some of the films that have a lot of VFX and they don't age very well. Like, that's the thing. I feel like, I'm not saying that every film needs to be that way, of course not. And I'm not saying that every film needs to be a cult film or survive the test of time. But if you're making a film, I feel like it's obvious that it's a better... I just feel that this is a... I really like this film. I really want it. I really like this film, and I'm a bit fed up of all the big push of CGI, and I'm really a bit fed up. I guess I marveled out. Maybe that's the word for it, you know. And I feel that this year was quite fresh on that side. We had a lot of really special things coming with Barbie, with this, with Oppenheimer, you know.
Right. I think what you're saying is also definitely the Marvel films and DC films were big. Oppenheimer's big, but it only had 200 visual effects shots. Yeah. In the recent Bake Off, there's a high percentage of what could be called invisible effects films.
Yes.
Poor Things, Society of the Snow.
Yeah.
There are others. I'm forgetting. But you know, there is Guardians. And there is Rebel Moon. Yeah. But there's a different buzz.
Then you have The Creator, which is an invisible setup
that's
as
an
well.
invisible effects film in the weirdest way possible, despite being a huge ILM production.
Yeah,
so I applaud the fact that the branch recognised Poor Things, but also the filmmaker. I applaud Yorgos for using visual effects in the best way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. I think we really like this film, Hugo.
Yeah, we do. We do. I wish we had more debate and maybe one of us hated it, but that's not going to happen. No, I think that's it, really. Like, I mean, I think we've covered everything. I really recommend people to go and watch it again. I guess, should we wrap up?
Yeah, for sure.
I guess we forgot to just thank our followers and our Patreons and everything. Should we maybe should just do that real quick? I mean, we can't thank enough all the support that we get every month on Patreon. And especially all the support, all the lovely messages we get there, and also the lovely messages we get on YouTube, and all the subscribers and all the viewers, and it's always so well received, the podcast. I just also wanted to remind everyone that lately I've been getting a lot of messages of people asking how can they hear the podcast on audio only and not just video, because we don't have it on Apple Podcasts anymore. We only have it on YouTube. I just want to remind everyone that there is a Google Music app for free that you can download, and you can listen to this podcast as an audio podcast there.
Great.
So every YouTube podcast, which is labeled as a podcast like our podcast is, can be listened to as a podcast on this app. So just go to your phone and download the Google Music app. It's free. And then you can listen to the VFX Notes podcast as an audio podcast.
Awesome.
So, because a lot of people ask me,
I might even do that.
a lot of people ask me about this, and I just wanted everyone to know that there is a way of, because I know that on video, on the YouTube app, you can't just listen to the audio; you have to watch the video. But there is that way. So I need to make more social posts about that. But I just wanted to thank everyone for all the support. It's been amazing. We've been running for more than 2 years now, and yeah.
And we're now doing them in person together. So
every day, yeah. Ian has moved now to London, and he's here, and that's it.
Thank you for watching this podcast on Poor Things. Thanks, Hugo, for having this amazing bunker, and thanks for having me today.
No problem. Thanks you. It's great to have you. I'll see you all later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.